in the same design process or the hierarchy, after we understood that the design has to be top to bottom, right? Then we understood that the in this top to down approach, right, you always start with a very complex function, that is the topmost layer. Okay, and you always try to subdivide each complex function into several set of less complex functions, we call them as subfunctions, and these subfunctions are supposed to be subdivided further into more and more simple subfunctions. Okay, until this whole process should be repeated until you get the uh, functions which are very simple functions, such as simple additions, multiplications, or maybe and or nan or logical functions, right? Complements, so some shifting operations like that. Until and unless you get very simple functions like that, you are supposed to keep on repeating this. Then we understood that as the complexity increases, right, you may have to change the organization of your system, like the layers might it might be required to exchange the layers or do some changes in the layers. That's what we call as the change in the organization of the system, right? Because there are several factors depending on which you might have to change this. All right, then whenever you place the different components of your system onto some location, that means it's a layout, right? You should ensure that whichever components are going to interact regularly or frequently, you have to place them right very close to each other, because if you place the components far, that indicates that there is delay associated with the signal communication of the signals, right? Also there will be what is called as a resistance coming into picture because of multiple wires being used to communicate, right? So you need to place them as close as possible physically. Physical distance should be very less, right? Then we understood that in the next point, that whenever you design right such digital systems, you always have to concentrate on the minimum interaction between the subparts, right? I have multiple blocks, right? Whichever blocks are not related, there should not be any interaction between them, right? It can be the interference, it can be the magnetic field, or right any other aspects, right? Because of which there will be what you call as the interference happening between them. You should avoid that. That's what is called as minimum interaction, right? Then functioning of any system should have maximum concurrency, in the sense, right, the whole device should be able to work concurrently independent of the number of subunits it has. Every unit should be capable of performing its operations, okay, independently, right, and simultaneously. That's what we call as maximum concurrency. And then we saw that processors should be able to adopt new technologies in short time. So you design something, later on, right, you get a new software update, right? The same system should be designed easily using your new software. All right, so these were the designing hierarchy and the requirements, right? Then we looked at the general arrangement of a arithmetic processor. So whenever you say that you are going to perform some arithmetic operations using a designed circuit, right, we need to have at least four components, right? One is a control unit, which is used to generate the timing and the control signals. There should be an ALU with the registers, arithmetic logic unit, to perform the mathematics, arithmetics, and logical operations. And the registers are required to store the data temporarily over there. Okay, then we need a memory, because whenever you read the data from the outside world, or whenever you have some result produced by the system, right, it has to be stored, it has to get stored in the memory, right? So we need a memory, and there is a IO. Okay, I for standing for input device, O for output device. Both we club together as some interfacing. So the the most general format of the connection, right, will be like this, right? You place them one after the other like this, and in order to carry the signals, right, you need a set of lines called bus, right? Here we are showing an example of three bus system where the data communication happens through a specific bus called data bus. And whenever the instructions are supposed to be passed from one unit to the other unit, you use a control bus. Okay, and whenever you are trying to address the specific address of a memory location, the address bus will be used. Okay, whenever you have multiple buses like this, the advantage is like, right, every bus can carry its own data at a given point of time. Yeah, there will be less waiting. Okay, right, so that's the ultimate idea of having multiple bus system like this. Again, this is a general diagram, that's all. Okay, so now whenever you start designing a processor, right, a small processor, in this case we are considering 4 bit, our first step, it has to be the design of the data path, right? How the data should propagate between the blocks. You have multiple options and you can choose one of them, right? And that looks like our first step. So first we see what are the options available. So the first option that is available is you have a block. That block itself is considered as a data path. From one side you take a data, and on the other side you deliver the data. Okay, now in the middle, right, uh, in this data path you might require the following things to happen. One is that the data comes, you process the data, so we call it as basic arithmetics, followed by the logical operations. Then you might require shifting. Shifting is in some time, in some sense, when you shift the data, either you are actually multiplying the data or dividing the data, right, by a specific factor. We'll see that later, but shifting is also important in that sense. Then you, whatever results you get, whatever partial results you get, you might have to save it. Okay, that's why these are the in the data path we included these 4 basic steps: arithmetics, logics, shifting, and temporary storage. Right, out of these 4, which one to be processed, right, which one should be carried out at a given point of time, will be decided by a control signal which we have marked on the same block from the bottom. Right, after this the data will flow out, that is data output. Okay, this is one type of data path that you can choose. Otherwise, the second option is that this is OR. The second type of data set type is that the data path is that you don't have multiple options like reading from one side and writing from other side. The same side you will read as well as you write. Okay, again that will be decided by the control signal whether you are reading or writing. Okay, in addition to this, so, and inside the data path the same 4 different operations are available: basic arithmetics, logic, shifting, and temporary storage. Okay, right, now so after, let's assume that you choose one of them. This is the step number 1. Always this has to be the step number 1. So once you select that, this has to be applied to each of the subunit of your design system, right, as per the requirement of, you can decide what requirements you want, but here we are doing it in general. Okay, and whichever interconnection you have chosen already, right, you can apply that and you can. So the connection needs to be established between the basic units like this. So in an example, we are considering there is an IO port which, right, takes the input or the output signals from your processor. Right. If at all it is acting like an input device, you are going to pass that into the registers. The register will take the data, right, and followed by the register. Then what you have, you are connecting it to a ALU, right? Then you are connecting to a shifter. Now you see either of the uh, data path which we have considered, right, we are using them here. right? Data enters from one side, leaves from other side, and you have a control there. So IO device or IO ports require control signal saying that whether you are reading or writing. That's why you need a direction control over there. Followed by when you have a register, right? Register which out there will be many registers available, right? Normally a simplest processor will have at least 10 registers. So out of the 10, which register you want to use for storing the data, you have to use a selection, right? So that's why you use a select control. So you can see that the select control is used in such a way that the 4-bit registers can be selected out of all available registers. Okay, then once you have some data present in the register, it might be required to pass them to the ALU because you want to perform one of the operation which you decide. So how do you do that? You use a operation control. That will be the control signal. Then it is given to the shifter, right? What type of shift you want, you can actually control over there, right? That is a shifting control. Left shift, right shift, shift through carry, shift without carry, etc. Rotate, etc. All those options are available, right? So out of those operations, which one you want to carry out at a given point of time, right? You can decide by the control signal. Right. Once that is done, then in the next step, you go for a tentative floor plan, right? In the sense, out of these blocks which you have selected, where you want to place the each one of them. Because we already know that in the hierarchy, we saw that whichever communicates regularly, they should be close to each other, right? And whichever is not communicating so regularly, you can place them away. So according to that rule, right, you can see that in this point we are saying that you place them tentative, right? Once it is done, then you go for the specific type of bus. What type of bus you want to use for the communication? So what type of bus refers to one of the three types of bus architectures possible, right? So the three types of bus architectures are as follows. All right, the first bus architecture is called as single bus or one bus architecture, right? Again, here we are showing simple diagram, block diagram, showing only three components. There are some registers, ALU followed by a shifter. Okay, so you see that a single bus is connected from end to end, right? Which carry the data. So registers to ALU, ALU to shifter, and shifter back to this. This whole thing will be a single bus, right? Now, what is the characteristic of a single bus architecture? Right? The single bus architecture is considered as the slowest of all possible bus architectures available. This is because at a given point of time, only one operation can take place. Such as in this case, let's assume I have an operation to be carried out in an ALU, which requires two operands, A and B, and those operands are stored in the registers, right? So at a given point of time, one of the operand will go to ALU. So first operand from registers to ALU, and it is stored there because I cannot do the operation until and unless I get the second operand. So it is stored in the ALU temporarily. Then you read the second operand. So the second point says that second operand from the registers to the ALU, and it will perform the ALU operation, right? As soon as the operation gets over, right, you can store the data. Again, that is temporarily storage that's going to happen in the ALU itself, right? Again, during this time, you cannot do any other read write operation because ALU is holding the data. If you try to overwrite that, you lose your data, right? So you still waste time over here. Then what you do, you move the data to the shifter will pass that data back to the registers where you can store. So until and unless these three steps will be completed, your ALU or your ALU will be idle. You are wasting the time. Okay, so that's what is the single bus architecture, right? If a question comes about that, you can explain this, I guess, right? Then we'll proceed further. There is a second type of bus which is called as a two bus architecture, right? Now, our problem still remains same. We have to read two operands from the registers into the ALU and move the result from ALU back to the registers. For this, in order to increase the speed, right? somebody came with an idea of using multiple buses. So instead of using single, let's try using two bus now. Okay, as shown in the diagram, you use the same three components: registers, ALU, and shifters. Okay, and instead of using a single bus, you are using two buses. Let's call the buses by name bus A and bus B. Okay, and the connection of each of the components with these buses are as shown in the diagram. So you one directional arrow, the means data can flow only in that direction. Okay, bidirectional means data can flow in both the directions. Okay, so now considering this, you can see that registers can bidirectionally pass the data with bus A, but unidirectional with bus B. Only output registers to bus B is possible. Like that, you can see. Now the connection is made with respect to ALU in the following sense. You can see that bus A is connected to A as an from bus A to ALU, its input. Bus B to ALU is also input, but there is a special connection denoted by S, which actually connects ALU to the bus B. Okay, and from bus B you are passing input to the shifter, and shifter's output will be delivered to bus A. This is how the connections are made. Okay, now you see that this is going to save a small amount of time for us compared to the one bus architecture. So how this is going to be done? It's straightforward. You can see here from the register, right? You can see the registers are connected to both bus A and bus B, right? Which means simultaneously you can read something on bus A and something on B. So you see both the operands A and B are sent from the registers to ALU, because register is connected to ALU through bus A. Register is also connected to ALU using bus B. So both will carry the data simultaneously. You don't have to wait. You see that some amount of time has been saved here compared to the previous method. Parallelly they come into this. Then as soon as they are available, you can perform the operation. Let's say it is expected to perform the addition operation. As soon as both the A and B are available, you perform the operation. Result is directly again, you don't have to wait. There is a separate line connecting the result to the bus B. Directly that result is passed on to this. At the same time, there is all the buses are free. You can directly pass it to the registers, sorry, not registers, shifters, and put the result back onto, right, the registers. So little bit of time has been saved compared to the previous one, and this uses two buses, hence the name is two bus architecture. Followed by, there is another technique called as a three bus architecture, where our intention is to fast things up further. So what you use three architectures, three buses. So you can see bus A and bus B, and the connections between A and B are register to bus A to ALU. Similarly, registers to bus B and bus B to ALU. This is how the connection is made, and the output of the ALU, the result will be directly moved to the shifter, and shifter will move back the result to registers using a separate bus, that is bus C. So here everything happens in a single shot, right? A, B moves to A and B operands will directly move to the ALU. At the same moment, ALU will perform the operation and gives the result to the shifter. Shifter immediately passes that back to the register. So there is no waiting at all. So this is the fastest one. Okay, right. Again, when you have, see, the most recent architectures are much more advanced than this. That is because you have multiple processors, right? Multiple, everything is multiple, right? It's like you have 10 shifters available, right? And you may have not just one ALU, maybe six or eight ALUs available, right? And definitely memory is not small. Memory is also very huge. A huge number of registers also available, because of which, right, you can use more buses over there to fasten the things up. All right. Okay, then after you select one of these three, right, our next intention is to plan the interconnections, right, where you need to decide where will be the power supply, right, at what points on your circuit you get the power supply lines, right. This is just to make sure that you allocate the proper locations, proper points, right. through which you get the power supply. And also you need to make sure that you will connect your system to the main data path, or it's actually called as parent system data bus. So in this diagram you can see that, right, the vertical lines are the control lines, okay, and horizontal lines show that either data bus or the power bus. Power bus is the one which carries the power signal, like 5 volts power supply, 9 volts, 3.3 volts, and so on. Okay, right. Now only one power supply line is required throughout. You can take the power from that. That's why the red color line, you can see that it passes through all the four different parts. Leftmost part is IO, then you have a 4-bit registers, then you have ALU followed by the 4-bit shifters. Right, instead of showing separate block diagrams, we wrote all at once like this. Okay, now you can see that the IO has an access for control lines. 4-bit access has two control lines on the left as well as right. ALU uses, right, two control lines, and the top you have power supply, bottom you have the data bus. That's bus number 2. And the same thing is applicable for a 4-bit shifter with one control on the left side. Right, so now you can see also, you can also note that the IO is connected to the parent system data bus. In the sense, this whole processor you are connecting into some main application, right? That main application is called as parent system. It will carry a data bus, right? So the data that is actually produced as an output from your processor should be given to that system, right? So you need an data bus connection. Again, that has been shown here with a vertical and double sided arrow mark, indicating that IO is connected to that parent system. So this is what is the example of the previous step. Okay, right. Once that is done, now you go for the accurate area requirement, because right, each of the block will require a specific amount of area in your chip, right? So that needs to be decided, and once that is decided, you can make the final floor plan, right? And then you go for layering, right? There is because if you don't make multiple layers for your practical circuit, right, it's going to take a lot of area, right? Just to avoid that, right, the multiple layers needs to be allocated for data, address, and the control paths. And when you do that, you should follow the following rules, right? Now I should take care that there will be an interconnection when lines touch each other on the same level. Lines in the sense metallic layers, right? You have several layers possible that you might have already studied in the previous chapters. Okay, so multiple layer design will be there, out of which one of the common layer is called as a metallic layer. If you have two different metal wires coming on the same layer, and if you see they are crossing each other, then that means it is a interconnection, right? So I should be careful when I draw such things. Okay, I should decide whether there has to be a interconnection or not. If it is not required, then you need to draw a separate layer for both of them, right? Keep them at separate layer. That's the first thing. Second, right, whenever we see a polysilicon layer crossing the diffusion layer, it means a channel gets formed. Because I know that what is polysilicon, it's actually, right, the insulator, right? Gate region is polysilicon. Diffusion is definitely, it's the substrate, correct? So I know that in from basics I know that polysilicon, if it is placed above the diffusion layer, it means, right, there is a channel form, which means it is a transistor. So I should be careful when I do this, right? Next, crossing of a poly and diffusion by metal is always allowed. There is no connection normally between them, right? So it is allowed. Even if you draw on the same layers, no mistake. Then, diffusion and the poly, if they cross, no problem, but you can make a connection with the metal. You can make a connection, right? You can show a contact. Then, if you want to have a connection between the diffusion and the, what you call, poly, then you have to use a buried contact. Okay, then if you have two metal layers, then you can join by using what is called as a wire. So this is what we had seen in the previous class.